The day they told me to get out, the day they told me I was nothing, echoes in my head even now. I remember the gravy congealing on the table, the forced smiles of relatives who secretly judged me, and the cold, hard look in my father's eyes. It wasn't just disappointment, it was dismissal, like I was some kind of stain they wanted to scrub away. It was the kind of moment that etches itself into your bones, a permanent reminder of where you came from and how far you have to go to escape it. Thanksgiving had always been a performance. My parents, ever the picture of suburban success, meticulously crafted an image of warmth and familial harmony for their friends and relatives. My brother Mark, the golden child, always played his part perfectly, recounting his latest achievements with a practiced humility that fooled everyone but me. And then there was me, Harper, the black sheep, the artist who dared to dream beyond the confines of their perfectly planned world. This year felt different, though. The air was thick with a judgment I couldn't shake, a feeling that I was about to be put on trial for failing to meet their expectations. The appetizers were barely cleared when my father launched into his annual lecture about my career, or lack thereof. "Harper," he began, his voice laced with a condescension that made my skin crawl. "When are you going to get serious about your life?" My mother chimed in, her tone saccharine sweet but with a razor-sharp edge. I tried to defend myself, to explain the commissions I'd been getting, the gallery that had expressed interest in my work, but my words were drowned out by their relentless barrage of criticism. It was the same tired script, a constant reminder that I wasn't living up to their standards. My brother, Mark, sat silently, a smug look on his face, as if enjoying my public humiliation. The tension escalated with every passing minute, fueled by years of unspoken resentments and unfulfilled expectations. Finally, my father slammed his fist on the table, his face red with anger. "I'm done with this, Harper. You're a grown woman. It's time you started acting like one." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. My mother nodded in agreement, her eyes cold and devoid of any warmth. I looked around the table, searching for a sign of support, a glimmer of understanding, but found only judgment and indifference. That's when I knew, deep down, that I was truly alone. I swallowed the lump in my throat, stood up, and walked out of the house, leaving behind the ruins of a life I no longer wanted. They thought they had broken me, that their words had crushed my spirit. But what they didn't know was that they had ignited a fire within me, a burning desire to prove them wrong, to show them that I was capable of far more than they could ever imagine. I didn't say a word. I didn't argue. I simply turned my back on them, a silent promise of the storm that was brewing inside me. The silence was my weapon. Their laughter was the fuel. The person I trusted most was one of them. The slam of the door behind me echoed the finality of their rejection. The streets blurred as I walked, the festive lights of Thanksgiving mocking my solitude. I had nowhere to go, no plan, just the burning ember of defiance in my chest. The first few weeks were a blur of cheap motels and desperate job applications. My savings dwindled with alarming speed, each dollar spent a stark reminder of my precarious situation. Landlords and employers alike seemed to sense my desperation, their smiles tinged with a predatory glint. Rejection letters piled up, each one a tiny paper cut to my already wounded pride. I tried selling my art, setting up a makeshift stall on street corners, but the holiday crowds hurried past, their eyes glazed over with consumerism, oblivious to the story etched on my face. The crisp winter air seeped into my bones, mirroring the coldness that had taken root in my heart. Sleepless nights were spent replaying the scene at Thanksgiving, the cruel words echoing in my mind, each repetition sharpening their sting. Doubts crept in like insidious vines, whispering that they were right, that I was a failure, that my dreams were nothing more than childish fantasies. I started questioning everything, my talent, my choices, my very worth as a human being. The weight of their disapproval was a crushing burden, threatening to suffocate the last flicker of hope within me. I tried reaching out to friends, but their offers of help felt laced with pity, a reminder of my diminished status. I couldn't bear to be a charity case, another burden on their already busy lives. So I retreated further into myself, building walls around my heart, determined to face this battle alone. One evening, huddled in a dimly lit motel room, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The face that stared back was gaunt and hollow-eyed, a stranger I barely recognized. The fire that had burned so brightly had been reduced to a smoldering ember, threatened by the winds of despair. I knew I couldn't continue down this path, that I had to find a way to reignite the flame, to reclaim my life from the ashes of their judgment. But how? The answer eluded me, hidden in the shadows of my fear and self-doubt. Just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, fate dealt another blow. A letter arrived, a formal eviction notice. The motel was being shut down and I had 48 hours to vacate. Panic seized me, a cold wave washing over my body. I had nowhere to go, no money, no prospects. I was truly alone, adrift in a sea of indifference. As I packed my meager belongings, a wave of anger washed over me, stronger than anything I had felt before. It wasn't just anger at my parents, but anger at myself for allowing their negativity to consume me, for letting their words define my worth. In that moment, something shifted within me. The ember that had been flickering so weakly suddenly burst into flame, fueled by a potent cocktail of rage and determination. I would not let them win. I would not let their judgment break me. I would rise from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The next morning, I walked out of the motel room, leaving behind the wreckage of my shattered dreams. But this time, I wasn't defeated. I was armed with a newfound resolve, a burning desire to prove them wrong, to show them that I was capable of anything I set my mind to. The streets were still cold, but the air felt different, charged with a sense of possibility. The battle had just begun. The person I trusted most was one of them. My brother Mark, always the dutiful son, the one who towed the line, the one who basked in my parents' approval. He had always been my confidant, the one I could turn to when the weight of their expectations became too much to bear, or so I thought. Desperate and running out of options, I swallowed my pride and called him, hoping for a lifeline. I explained my situation, the eviction, the lack of funds, the crushing weight of my parents' disapproval. I begged him for help, not a handout, but a loan, a temporary place to stay, anything to get back on my feet. He listened patiently, his voice laced with a sympathy that felt genuine. He promised to talk to my parents, to try and reason with them, to convince them to give me another chance. He said he would call me back the next day with an update. I clung to that promise like a drowning man to a raft, my hope flickering back to life. The next day came and went, but the call never came. I tried calling him repeatedly, but my calls went straight to voicemail. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Something was wrong. Finally, late that evening, he answered. His voice was cold and distant, devoid of any warmth or concern. He said he had spoken to our parents, but their decision was final. They would not help me. He told me, his voice laced with a cruel satisfaction, that I had made my bed and now I had to lie in it. He said I was a disappointment, a failure, and that I deserved everything that was happening to me. His words were like a knife twisting in my heart. The betrayal cut deeper than anything my parents had ever said or done. He wasn't just my brother, he was my supposed friend, the one person I thought I could always count on. And now he had turned against me, siding with the very people who had tried to crush my spirit. The realization hit me like a physical blow, shattering the last vestiges of my faith in humanity. It wasn't just about the money or the place to stay. It was about the betrayal, the cold, calculated cruelty of someone I had trusted implicitly. In that moment, the burning ember of defiance within me flared into an inferno. I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't beg or plead or try to reason with them. I would show them. I would prove them all wrong. I would rise above their negativity, their judgment, their betrayal. I would become the success they said I could never be. And when I did, they would regret the day they turned their backs on me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about revenge. A cold, calculated, and meticulously planned revenge. The streets became my home. I found refuge in the shadows, scavenging for scraps of food, and huddling in doorways to escape the biting wind. Each day was a battle for survival, a constant struggle against hunger, cold, and the gnawing despair that threatened to consume me. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by nightmares of my family's rejection and my brother's betrayal. The city, once a beacon of opportunity, now felt like a cruel and indifferent maze, its glittering lights mocking my destitution. I saw the pity in the eyes of strangers, the averted gazes of those who couldn't bear to acknowledge my plight. I became invisible, a ghost haunting the fringes of society, stripped of my dignity and my hope. One particularly brutal night, a group of men cornered me in an alley, their eyes glinting with predatory intent. They saw my vulnerability, my desperation, and they sought to exploit it. I fought back with every ounce of strength I could muster, but I was no match for their combined force. They took what little I had left, leaving me bruised, broken, and utterly defeated. Lying there in the cold, damp alley, I felt a profound sense of emptiness, a void where my spirit used to be. The pain was physical, but it was also emotional, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. I wondered if this was it, if this was how my story would end, alone and forgotten in the darkness. As the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of gray and pink, I felt a single tear trickle down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or despair, but a tear of pure, unadulterated rage. I was done being a victim. I was done letting them define me. I would not let their cruelty break me. I would use this pain, this anger, this betrayal as fuel to forge a new path, a path of my own making. I would rise from the ashes of their judgment, stronger and more determined than ever before. The transformation wasn't instantaneous, but it was profound. The next few days were a blur of feverish activity. I started by cleaning myself up, finding a public restroom where I could wash the grime and despair from my body. The reflection that stared back at me was still gaunt and haunted, but there was a new glint in my eyes, a spark of defiance that had been missing for too long. I needed a plan, a strategy to escape this abyss and reclaim my life. I started observing the city, studying its rhythms, its vulnerabilities, its hidden opportunities. I spent hours in libraries, devouring books on business, finance, and self-defense. I learned how to navigate the intricate web of social services, how to access resources for the homeless and unemployed. I practiced my art, sketching portraits of passers-by, honing my skills, and building a small portfolio. Slowly but surely, I began to piece together a new identity, a new purpose. The anger that had consumed me began to morph into a cold, calculated determination. I started thinking about my family, about their betrayal, about the pain they had inflicted upon me. But this time, the thoughts didn't cripple me with despair. They fueled my resolve. I began to formulate a plan to expose their hypocrisy, to dismantle their carefully constructed image of perfection, to make them pay for what they had done. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to do whatever it took. The first step was to gather information. I needed to know everything about their lives, their finances, their secrets. I started subtly probing my old friends, fishing for information about my family's activities. I discovered that my brother Mark was deeply involved in some shady business dealings, skirting the edges of legality in his pursuit of wealth and power. My parents, too, had secrets, hidden investments, and questionable associations that could bring their carefully curated world crashing down. The more I learned, the more determined I became. I realized that their biggest weakness was their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable, that their wealth and status shielded them from any consequences. They had underestimated me, dismissed me as a naive and harmless artist. But they were about to learn that art could be a powerful weapon, capable of exposing the truth and shattering illusions. I started documenting everything, collecting evidence of their wrongdoings, meticulously building a case against them. I knew that I had to be patient, that I had to play the long game, but I was confident that, in the end, justice would prevail. The streets were no longer my prison, but my training ground. I was no longer a victim, but a strategist, a planner, a force to be reckoned with. The silence had become my greatest weapon, and the storm was coming. I smiled, a cold, hard smile that mirrored the steel in my heart. They had made a grave mistake when they turned their backs on me. They had unleashed a force they could never have imagined. The game had just begun. The smile I wore felt foreign, a mask I carefully crafted each time I interacted with anyone connected to my former life. I played the part of the reformed prodigal, humbled by hard times, eager to reconcile. My parents, initially suspicious, slowly began to thaw, their vanity blinding them to the truth. Mark, ever the arrogant one, reveled in my perceived downfall, subtly boasting about his successes. unaware that he was feeding me the very information I needed. I learned their routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. I discovered the intricate details of Mark's business dealings, the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the illegal transactions he thought were so cleverly concealed. My parents' secrets were more personal but equally damaging: hidden assets, tax evasions, and a history of manipulating others to maintain their social standing. I began to document everything, using a hidden camera disguised as a simple phone charger in the living room during our stilted reconciliations. The audio was crystal clear, capturing every word, every nuance of their conversations. I backed up the files religiously, storing them in multiple secure locations, both physical and digital. I even hired a freelance forensic accountant online, using a prepaid card and a burner email, to trace the flow of funds through Mark's complex web of companies. The report I received was explosive, a detailed account of fraud, money laundering, and bribery. It was the smoking gun I needed. I knew I had to be careful to avoid arousing their suspicions. I feigned interest in their lives, asking innocuous questions, offering hollow praise, all while meticulously gathering evidence. I even started attending their church again, enduring the sanctimonious sermons and the judgmental stares, all for the sake of appearances. It was a grueling performance, a constant tightrope walk between maintaining my facade and suppressing my rage. One evening, while helping my mother organize her financial documents, I stumbled upon a hidden compartment in her desk. Inside, I found a stack of old letters, correspondence between her and Mark detailing their scheme to manipulate me into selling my shares in the family business years ago. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the confirmation of their long-standing betrayal. My vision blurred. The pen in my hand snapped in two, the ink staining the documents a dark, symbolic crimson. I excused myself, feigning a headache, and retreated to the bathroom, where I locked the door and allowed myself a moment of raw, unfiltered rage. I smashed a glass against the wall, the shards scattering across the floor, mirroring the shattered remains of my trust. But the outburst was brief. I couldn't afford to lose control. I had a plan to execute. I spent countless hours researching the law, familiarizing myself with the statutes related to fraud, embezzlement, and defamation. I consulted with a discreet lawyer, again using a pseudonym and a prepaid card, to understand my legal options and the best way to present my evidence. He advised me to gather as much irrefutable proof as possible and to be prepared for a protracted legal battle. He also warned me about the potential for retaliation, urging me to take steps to protect myself and my assets. I took his advice to heart, setting up a secure trust to shield my remaining funds and investing in a sophisticated surveillance system for my small apartment. I knew they wouldn't hesitate to use their resources to try and silence me, but I was ready for them. I even started taking self-defense classes, learning how to protect myself physically. I trained relentlessly, pushing my body to its limits, channeling my anger and frustration into each punch, each kick. I became stronger, more confident, more prepared than I had ever been before. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I was like a coiled spring, wound tight and ready to unleash. I knew that the moment I revealed my hand, everything would change. There would be no turning back. But I was willing to risk it all. I was driven by a burning desire for justice, a need to expose their hypocrisy and make them pay for their sins. The date was set. I had chosen Thanksgiving Day, the same day they had cast me out, as the day of reckoning. It was a symbolic gesture, a way to reclaim the holiday and turn their celebration into a nightmare. I had meticulously planned every detail, from the timing of the release to the method of dissemination. I had gathered all the evidence, prepared all the documents, and secured all the necessary resources. I was ready. The storm was about to break. The final preparations were complete. Every piece was in place. Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and cold, a stark contrast to the inferno of rage simmering within me. I arrived at my parents' house, feigning a cheerful disposition, bearing a store-bought pie as a peace offering. The air inside was thick with false cheer and the cloying scent of roasted turkey. My parents greeted me with strained smiles, their eyes betraying a mixture of guilt and suspicion. Mark clapped me on the back, his grip a little too tight, his eyes a little too knowing. I played along, engaging in polite conversation, complimenting the decorations and asking about their plans for the holiday. All the while, my heart pounded in my chest, a countdown to the moment of truth. After dinner, as the family gathered in the living room, feigning contentment, I casually suggested we watch some old home videos. I had found them while cleaning out my apartment, I said. A nostalgic trip down memory lane. My parents exchanged nervous glances. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. They had no idea what was coming. I popped the first tape into the player. It began innocently enough with footage of my childhood birthdays, family vacations, and school plays. But then, the tone shifted. The screen flickered, and a new video began to play. It was a recording of Mark, several years ago, bragging to a friend about his scheme to sabotage my art career, how he had spread rumors about my work, and how he had manipulated my gallery contacts to blacklist me. The color drained from Mark's face. My mother gasped. My father stared at the screen in stunned silence. The next video showed my parents discussing their plans to disinherit me, how they had secretly transferred my inheritance to an offshore account, and how they had orchestrated my eviction. The evidence was damning, irrefutable, and utterly devastating. I watched their faces as their carefully constructed world crumbled around them. Their masks of respectability shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. But the final blow was yet to come. I had saved the most explosive revelation for last. I paused the video and addressed them directly, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. "There's one more thing you should know," I said, my eyes fixed on Mark. "Remember those shady business deals you've been involved in?" Mark's eyes widened in panic. He knew what was coming. I pressed play. The screen lit up with a detailed presentation of Mark's illegal activities, the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the fraudulent transactions. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulously documented, and irrefutably linked to him. I had even included copies of his emails, bank statements, and signed contracts. He was caught red-handed with no way to deny or explain away his crimes. As the video played, I could see the life draining from his eyes. His face contorted in a mixture of rage, fear, and despair. My parents were equally horrified, their faces pale and drawn. They had invested everything in Mark's success, believing he was their golden child, the one who would carry on their legacy. Now their dreams were shattered, their reputations ruined, and their future uncertain. When the video ended, the room was filled with a deafening silence. No one spoke, no one moved. The only sound was the whirring of the tape player. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, and walked towards the door. As I reached the threshold, I turned back and looked at them one last time. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, a cold smile playing on my lips. And then I walked out, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. The storm had finally broken. But the true devastation was only just beginning. As I stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, I felt a sense of liberation I had never experienced before. The weight of their betrayal had been lifted from my shoulders. I was finally free. But I knew that this was just the beginning. The legal battles, the public scrutiny, and the inevitable fallout were yet to come. But I was ready for it. I had spent years preparing for this moment. I had gathered all the evidence, secured all the resources, and steeled myself for the fight. I would not back down. I would not be silenced. I would see justice done, no matter the cost. I knew they would come after me, try to discredit me, try to destroy me. But I was prepared for that too. I had taken steps to protect myself, to shield my assets, and to ensure my safety. I had learned from their mistakes. I would not underestimate them, but I would not be intimidated by them either. I was ready for whatever they threw at me, because I had something they didn't, the truth. And the truth, as they were about to discover, was a very powerful weapon. The phone rang just as I reached my car. It was Mark. His voice was trembling with rage and desperation. He screamed. I simply hung up the phone and tossed it into a nearby dumpster. It was time to disappear. The next phase of my plan was about to begin. I had a new identity, a new location, and a new mission. I would continue to expose their crimes, to dismantle their empire, and to ensure that they paid for their actions. I would not rest until justice was served. The game was far from over. In fact, it was only just getting started. The next morning, the story broke. Come on. The videos and documents I had released anonymously were plastered across the internet, impossible to ignore. Mark's business empire began to crumble almost immediately. Investors pulled out, contracts were canceled, and his carefully constructed image of success dissolved into a toxic cloud of scandal. The authorities launched investigations into his shady dealings, and it wasn't long before he was facing a litany of charges: fraud, money laundering, and bribery, each accusation a crushing blow to his already tarnished reputation. My parents fared no better. Their social circle evaporated overnight. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the pariah family. The church they had attended for decades quietly suggested they find a new place of worship. Their reputation, once impeccable, was now in tatters, a cautionary tale whispered among the wealthy elite. I watched it all unfold from a safe distance, using burner phones and encrypted connections to monitor the news and social media. The satisfaction was undeniable, a cold, hard pleasure that resonated deep within my soul. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about holding them accountable for their actions. It was about reclaiming my life and my dignity. I knew that their suffering was far from over. The legal battles would drag on for years, and the public scrutiny would continue to haunt them. But I had achieved my goal. I had exposed their hypocrisy, dismantled their empire, and made them pay for their sins. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. It was my mother. Her voice was weak and trembling, barely audible above the static. She pleaded with me to stop, to forgive them, to give them a chance to make amends. She said that they had lost everything, that they were ruined, that they were desperate. I listened in silence, my heart unmoved by her words. "You had your chance," I said finally, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. And then I hung up the phone. A few weeks later, I received a package in the mail. It was a single photograph, a picture of my parents' house, now boarded up and abandoned. The word "foreclosed" was scrawled across the front in large red letters. I stared at the photo for a long time, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over me: sadness, anger, and a strange sense of emptiness. But beneath it all, there was a flicker of satisfaction. Justice had been served. The storm had passed. I deleted the photo and burned the envelope, severing the last remaining tie to my past. I packed my bags, said goodbye to my temporary safe house, and started moving again, heading to a new city, a new life, a new beginning. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, a faint smile playing on my lips. They had lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.